Okay, this is a reply to my Misery in Me's video, A Graceful End.
The big question, what is the cure to the problem of futility and wasted suffering?
Yeah, I don't think I've ever heard actually anybody explain what this wasted suffering is. But so if you can explain that to me, that would be very useful.
The red button here, it's a thought experiment, but, if you really had a machine that could, like, create a black hole or whatever and just vaporize the Earth, it doesn't seem like that's so far off reality,
Well, if we're going to have engineers being able to make black holes, then could I put in a request for a time machine? It's a bit far-fetched, is it not?
I don't know, it may be possible to create some machine like that, but even if we can't create some kind of a machine like that, how do we make this happen? How do we implement it in an ethical way, in a way that doesn't involve concentration camps and death squads or whatever?
Yeah, well, I think I kind of made it clear that I wasn't particularly thinking literally of concentration camps or death squads, right? Actually, I was really taking human beings out of the equation altogether, to be honest, but I didn't make that clear. So I'm really just thinking in terms of, if the philosophy is really all about balance of harm, right, an extension of the better not to have been philosophy or principle of the Benatar guy, then that's really where I was arguing from a point of view of, right, and my observations on problems that I can see in that.
So basically, the conclusion is valid. It's better that we never came into existence. It's better that we go extinct sooner. But how?
It's better. It's better for people if you think that it's better never to have existed as a person, then because things can go wrong in your life, and and that's bad. And the things going right. If you stop things going right in your life, then that's not bad either. Then that's fine for human beings, right? But we're not in isolation here.
Do we implement this? Well, it can be implemented. You said you use the example of 1,000 years of Bergen-Belsens or whatever versus preventing million years of horror. So are we prepared to go through 1,000 years of horrific suffering to prevent a million years of suffering? No, it doesn't have to be Bergen-Belsen. It doesn't have to be...
Yeah, I understand that it doesn't have to be anything. That's the point, right? That the balance of harm equation doesn't tell us anything other than the extreme limit that if the I don't know, if the future is 1,000 harm units, then presumably that sets the limit to how much harm that you're willing to inflict in order to achieve a net gain of 1 harm unit, presumably. If it doesn't say that, then and I've got it wrong, then please just tell me I've got it wrong. But if I followed the logic, I can't see how that can't follow from the equation. So so I think that's going to be a problem for anyone evangelizing about this idea.
The Holocaust, it doesn't have to be 1,000 years of Holocaust. 1,000 years is a very long time. So,
well, not really.
If you think about like how we've progressed over the last 200 years from, religion to, all the scientific technology, all our understanding of the world, 1,000 years is a very long time for that knowledge to filter through to culture. I have hair in my mouth. And so 1,000 years is a very long.
The time period really doesn't matter. I mean, in terms of your a problem for anybody evangelizing this idea is that that hits a really hard meme to propagate, right? You just have to recognize that. That's going to be a hard meme to, not only do you have the religious types and just basically our innate sense of self-importance and everything and all the psychological reasons for that and evolutionary reasons for that and everything else, that's going to be a really hard thing to go up against. You're going to be swimming against the tide, not only with human beings, but you're not going to be able to persuade animals to change their ways, right? It's just built in. That's what life does. It's what it's been doing for 4 billion years.
Long time. So that's a long time to implement this philosophy. You can do it in a step-by-step fashion. At this moment, all of it.
How can you do? Okay, look. So ignore human beings, right? Just assume that you have managed to persuade everybody to sign up for this, or some other way of imposing, right, this idea on human beings. You've got rid of the human beings, or whatever, effectively, or you've agreed that there's going to be some crew left over that's going to dismantle the rest of it. You can't do this in a step-by-step way, right? Ecosystems just don't respond like that. There's resistance to it, and you have to accept the reality of that. And you have to, if you're going to come up with these ideas, you just can't be hand-wavy about it. We know ecology, right? We know enough ecology to know that this will be the case.
Doing is making arguments and saying why we should do this. We're trying to get people to look at this as a serious option instead of sort of dismissing it and laughing or whatever. We're trying to get people to seriously think about this, and then.
Yeah, well, I am seriously thinking about this, and I'm seriously thinking that the people who are saying that we should seriously think about it are not thinking seriously enough about it. Okay? I'm not trashing your idea. I'm exploring it, and I'm seeing problems with it, and I'm trying to point those problems out. And I think given that you are proposing to sterilise the planet, I don't think it's unreasonable to expect reasonable responses.
People seriously think about it, and let's give it time, and then and then we all live, in this kind of truth, and to have, so that a lot of us have a proper understanding of reality. Then what do we do with it? Now people who are atheists who understand evolution, they're still like, we can't. There's no way to stop it. Let's just keep on trying to make life better or whatever. That's their solution. But what they're saying is no.
Well, obviously that's not a solution, right? But you could say it's fucking difficult to stop, and that is a realistic position. And to say that just in some kind of hand-wavy way, oh, it'll be easy, don't worry, we'll sort it out, somebody will think of something, I'm sorry, but that's just not good enough, because the reality suggests otherwise.
No, the solution is not to make life better, the solution is to not create life. That is the solution, right? So instead of people...
But you're going up against a system which is inherently interested in creating more life. Okay, that's just a fact.
People saying we can't do anything and let's just ease the pain. No, people really have to say, yes, we can do something about it. And the first thing you do is to say you can do something about it. And the second thing is to not create new life, not have a child. That's the second thing you can do.
Yeah, but you have to acknowledge that in the balance of harm equation that achieves nothing, okay? Just because your system of ethics, well, you know, we all have systems of ethics, right? Different cultures have systems of ethics. Just because your ethics points the way to how we individually or collectively would like the world to be, it doesn't necessarily dictate the sequence of events which will be compatible with that ideal world that the ethics is trying to create, right? If having children was a crime and I had a child, I could go to court and be prosecuted for having a child on the basis that I have created harm into existence. If I don't have a child, and the resources and energy and everything else that would have created that child is just left in the ecosystem and used by something else, ethically I would be guiltless because I haven't propagated my DNA, I haven't created a human child into existence, but I will have created a lot of little creatures, bits of creatures all over the fucking place, and the only reason the system of ethics wouldn't prosecute me for that is because it hasn't got my DNA written all over it. Now, if the DNA is DNA and animals are animals, then you know, which the philosophy states or whatever, you know, we're equivalent animals, then why am I less guilty for not having a child? And you know, I'm not ignorant of that position, so I'm not guiltless. So even though the ethics says I'm not guilty, I am guilty, right? So there's no way out of that situation. If I have children, I'm guilty. If I don't have children, I'm guilty. I can't change that.
Now, so that's it's like a person, okay? I'm not going to have a child, so that's another thing you're doing. Then we make arguments for why we need to create laws that restrict for procreation, for instance, so you can do, you know, incentive, disincentive, you know, tax breaks or whatever to people who don't have kids, you know. And I think in many...
Yeah, okay, fine, but it's not about, I'm just saying, it's not a balance of harm, it's not a balance of harm thing, unless you have good reason for thinking that human beings suffer more harm than animals, then I think that perhaps in some cases in some instances that's true. In other instances, I think animals probably suffer more. So I'm just saying that on the balance of harm thing, you are not achieving anything.
Suggested some kind of a voucher system where people only are allowed to have a certain, like maybe one kid or 2 kids or per family or whatever, and if someone wants to have more children, they have to buy the voucher from someone else who doesn't want to have a child. So there are various practical ways to implement this. And if you really think about this, if someone really understands what nature is and how cruel it is, why would an ethical person who understands that have any intention to have a child? That would be unethical.
Because perhaps they recognize what I said previously, that they recognize that they're being unethical, but that by that by being ethical, they're not. They're doing the same thing. The only thing that's different is that the squirrels and mice and rabbits and things are not going to be knocking on your door asking for pocket money.
Ethical, right? So if you understand it's like coming into existence is always a harm, why would you want to create that harm? So the more people understand the ethical basis of anti-natalism, they will have less and less justification to create new life. So, 1,000 years, maybe 100 years from now, if you're still around, maybe people will be more receptive to the idea. And then maybe if 20 years after that, maybe they might be implementing laws that are restricting for procreation because there might be a lot of people who don't understand it or who are resistant to it. But it's a meme. The memes change the culture. The culture changes our psychologies, our values. We won't be like a culture that has these family values. We might be a culture that understands what it means to be a sentient creature. And so we will have a more respect for the welfare of animals, the welfare...
Well, it's plus and minuses, isn't it? If you respect the welfare of humans, then you might go with the anti-natalism thing because you're reducing the harm there. But you're kind of disrespecting the animals because the animal suffering goes up. So it's I'm all for population reduction, right? But I don't see how the balance of harm equation is going to work as a rationale.
Of other human beings, the welfare of what type of economy we should be living under. Maybe capitalism, exploitation, maybe a profit for the sake of profit is not what life should be about, given that we were brought into this by evolution and that we all have welfare states. Maybe people will realize, hey, maybe the object here is not to make money, but actually the object is to create a system that caters to the welfare of all of these sentient beings. Maybe that's what an economy should be doing. Not just to make money and help few, but to actually, given that we are all equal in the sense that we all have the same welfare states, maybe that's what an economy should be doing. So, 1,000 years, it doesn't have to be Bergen-Belsens or death squads or whatever, it doesn't have to be that. It can be implemented. That's a very long time to implement this process. And what do you do with the animals? We can develop technologies using nanomachines and all that to make it, to make it so that they cannot have, progeny. They can't procreate. So we've got look at all of the.
Well, just an observation here. We've got plenty of pests and diseases that people have spent an awful long time trying to, eradicate, and it's hard to think. I can't think of the examples I can think of where that was successful, I can count those on one hand, right? So it's sort of, all the extinctions that we have created have been, incidental, because we've just trashed their habitats, right? When we've actually gone after things, because they're an irritation to us, failure all the way.
Genetic information we've gotten. So look at all the science. We can take all of this and put it to productive use. And, maybe when the population goes down to perhaps a few 100,000 or whatever, or maybe, I don't know, however how much you need to run a sustainable kind of system, then, you can think about how do we, there's a way to bring the planet down. Because right now, you're 7 billion...
Yeah, well, that's the kind of thing you're going to have to think of, because, if you bring the population down too much, then presumably you're not going to have enough manpower to implement whatever it is you're going to do. So you could be making the situation worse then, couldn't you?
People, it's a lot, but gradually over 1,000 years, how long did it take for the population of the Earth to go from 1 billion to 7 billion? It's like 100 years, right? I mean...
Yeah, consider every organism is like that, right? Every organism on the planet have intrinsic growth rates, right, which are exponential. So that's something you're going to have to consider, right, when you're doing your implementation.
If we implement the process, a few hundred years, that population can go down again. And then, you can, at the same time, work towards measures to restrict or make species on the various animal species go extinct. Because they don't need to be here. We don't need to... we don't need...
Okay, one thing which I think you and perhaps others have confused is this extinction and death, right? So... right, you can have a mass extinction, right, where 70% of the population of the species go extinct, right? And you think, oh, okay, that's from your point of view, from a balance of harm point of view, you might think, oh, that's good, because those species don't have any future offspring, so that they don't suffer anymore. But what do you think happens to the number of individuals on the planet when one of those extinction events happen? I mean, it doesn't take 10, 20 million years for those numbers to recover, right? So it might take 20 million years for biodiversity, the number of species, to recover, but how long does it take for the number of individuals of the survivors that are left? 10 years? 20? It's just nothing.
We don't need elephants and lions and all of these things running around. They don't need to exist. We don't need to have a zoo kind of situation where people can go, oh, look at the animals. They don't need to be here. They are like those creatures are exposed to risks of harm. So, it's an open-ended philosophy. I mean, we don't talk about the implementation stages because right now we're just making the arguments. But the implementation, it doesn't have to be so like horrific or whatever,
Well, says you, and without anything to back this up, and so it's all very well accusing people of being a naysayer or whatever, but if you've really not considered these problems, then why should anybody take you seriously? I mean, really.
If someone, look, we're making that. If someone listens to this and does something crazy, like, I'm going to do something crazy right now. I mean, are you going to blame the people who are making the arguments for what those people do? I mean, someone, we talked about the red button, yes. And then, sometimes we talk about, revolution and all of that. But, no one has said, let's go out and do something crazy right now. No one has said that. So it doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be done in this horrific way as you're suggesting. It can be done in
I'm glad to hear that, but the thing is that you are going to have no say in that. Probably nobody in the next few hundred years is going to have a say in that. So I think you have to respect the observation that since we have no control over the people who are going to exist in the future, that we've got really no idea how they would feel about it and what lengths they would go to implement something which they are sure in their own mind is right. Okay?
An ethical way. There is an ethical way to bring about extinction, and anti-natalism is part of that ethics, because it only asks people to not have kids, and that can be done in a step-by-step fashion.
Well, I think there are ways to do that, but I think if you're interested in population reduction, then I think the balance of harm thing is something which you should run a mile from, because it doesn't go anywhere. It's not useful to your aim. Yeah, I guess that will be my observation.
Another point you make is you talk about the physics of the nature and how you can't change the physics. But no, we're not asking to change the physics. All we're asking is people to act rationally, to make rational choices, you know. We have an intelligence. We can make, this brain can deliberate, make...
Yeah, but I mean, have my arguments not been rational, right? I'm not arguing from a position of religion. I'm not arguing from a position of nature is somehow lovely and knows what it's doing. I'm just saying how nature is, and so to tell somebody like that they are being irrational is absurd.
Value judgments, they can make choices. But what we're saying is, the ethical choice is to not have kids and to not impose life. So this is not about physics. This is more.
It's ethical, but impractical. In the consequence, you know, we are born, and our actions and our inactions have consequences, right? Whether we like it or not. Our ethics that we create and propagate in our societies are intended to minimise bad things happening, right? Maybe, and maximise good things happening. But whether we do things or don't do things, they still have consequences that are, and sometimes consequences, you know, we might have ethics that are, for the best of intentions, the outcomes are intended to be very good, but they have bad consequences, and we have a limit to what we can predict, what those consequences are.
About using our brains, our intelligence to make the right choices, and that can be done. Yeah, it's a deterministic universe, but the means are part of the deterministic process.
Yeah, so our ethics don't, there's a limit to how much our ethics can deal with that.
The means can change people's behavior. So, yeah, so what do I say about that? It doesn't have to be 1,000 years of Bergen-Belsens. It could be 1,000 years of a graduated process of working towards extinction. And even if we bring the population down, even if we remove a few animal species, that itself is negating... Oh, then you say...
No, it isn't. It isn't again. Think about it. Think about the consequences of removing 10% of the species, say, you know, in Australia. What does that do to the remaining 90% of the species? What are they going to do? Are they just going to sit around and do nothing?
Well, if you stop some people, the rest of the resources are going to be used by other organisms. Okay, fine. But the fact that you prevented those people who would have come into existence, that is a benefit for those people who would have come but who are not here. So if you spared...
Yeah, and it's a bad thing for the things that come into existence because those people don't exist.
Even though...
Or those creatures that don't exist.
Other organisms would take up those resources and use it. At least you would have spared those organisms who could have come.
Yes, so it makes us feel better about ourselves, but it achieves nothing.
Yeah, but who did it? You see? It's like, let's say there's a future war. And let's say you could have been in that war. You could have died horrifically. But because someone did not have a child, you did not get into the war. So it was a benefit to you. You know what I mean? So...
But so that means just somebody else gets conscripted.
There is a benefit to not to spreading the memes and asking people not to have kids, because those kids who would have come did not come, and they were spared. So even if those resources are going to be used to create another person or another sentient being, no.
So this is just about making us feel better, is it? I mean, presumably you wouldn't present your philosophy like that. So presumably you can't really argue like that.
You would have spared those individual conscious experiences from suffering and misery. Yes, other individual conscious experiences are going to be taken up, but still you would have still spared the ones who would have come but did not. So let's say we restrict the human situation, and the resources which humans would have taken up are taken by other sentient beings. Well, yeah, that is a problem, right? So what do? We still keep on working at it. Then we try a way to make those species go extinct. This is a process that has to be done gradually. It can't...
Well, having just increased their population number by reducing the human population.
Be done gradually. I'm not saying it has to, but it can be done gradually. There's no point in saying, well, if you stop one thing, another one's going to...
Look, it's going to be like that game at the fairground, right? Where the crocodiles pop up holes and you have to hit them with a hammer, right? Once you've got one, another one pops up. You know, that's what ecosystems are like. I mean, that's just how it is. I'm not approving of that. I'm not saying that's somehow magical and we should be all, you know, awe-inspired or any of that sort of stuff. I'm just saying that that's how ecosystems are. You remove one species and another one will start using those resources. You just, you know, that's just how it is, and we can observe this, right?
Its place. Well, that's just. Well, what can we do? We have to keep on working at it. You know, yeah, the resources are going to be there, but if the creature...
So again, it's just about us feeling better. It's just that we are feeling that we are working towards something, even though it's completely futile.
If a particular species is not around to exploit it, then the resources are just going to be there. You know, if you prevent species or a life from coming into a situation to take up those resources, the resources are just going to be there. If nothing's there to exploit it, it's still going to be there, right? The resources are just going to be there. So
no, because I mean, if you talk to ecologists and say, you can do these. They're natural experiments, right? You put species on islands, right? So there tends to be lower species diversity on islands. just because they're hard to get to, or the extinction rates are quite high on islands or whatever. But the species that are there and that persist just tend to occupy wider ranges of niches than they would on the continent, where they're outcompeted by other species. So it doesn't work like that. The niche breadth is very, very elastic.
Well, yeah, I think we can do it. I think we can make this happen in a graceful way. It doesn't have to be wars and concentration camps and all of that stuff. The point is, right now we're just making the argument to say we shouldn't even think about this because it'll lead to Bergen-Belsens. Is this not right?
No, I'm not saying it necessarily will. I'm just saying that there's nothing in the philosophy to suggest that it wouldn't, and that it's as I explained earlier, if my interpretation is correct, that it's only going to be limited by your hypothetical quantity of harm that you think that you are avoiding.
There's no, the solution is to not create life. That's the cure. Trying to make life a little bit better and better is just not it's not a good enough solution.
Yeah, sure, it's not a good enough solution, but in the absence of a cure, then it's the only option left open to people. So it's just it's a bit rich to just sort of rag on people who are trying to make some kind of impact on their own lives, or the lives of others, or the lives of other sentient creatures, as best they can, and because you don't have an alternative, and people are going to see that.
I can't see that I see that as a defeatist kind of solution. To people who look at life and say, yeah.
Well, call it what you like, but it's just how it is. Unfortunately, I'm not approving of that situation. I'm just saying that that's how it is.
It's better that we never got here, but since we are here and we can't do anything about it, we just have to make it better. That's just not good enough. That kind of a mindset is what we need to change. We've got to get people thinking, no, we can do something about it, and these are the things that we can do. Don't have kids, to try and spread the memes, try and get people to understand what life is about, try and work on creating a...
Well, I think if you're going to try and spread this this idea, then just as an observer, I would say that you just have to you're going to have to address these questions and these problems, these real life problems. If you're going to take the philosophy and make it into something that's applicable in the real world, you're going to have to appreciate what the real world is like. You've appreciated the nature of DNA, but I don't see I don't see any problems particularly with your interpretation of that. But I don't see any other homework. I don't see any evidence that you've considered these problems of ecology, or what you often talk about extinction and mass extinction, and that extinction is coming anyway, and all that sort of thing. But I don't see any evidence that you've considered these problems in light of your own philosophy, in light of balance of harm, and that just telling people that they're being irrational is just not good enough.